Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Retirement. Today is Wednesday, August 2nd, and the time is 9:14 a.m. First item is our calling to order, and we'll pass this on to staff.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe. This meeting is being held virtually and in person, so I will do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Trustee Robbins and Trustee Oakham will not be joining us today. Trustee Knox?
Good morning, I'm here.
Trustee Gray? Good morning. Trustee Santos?
Morning.
Trustee Sanchez? Morning. Trustee Harris?
Morning.
Trustee Green?
Present.
Trustee Greenwood? Trustee Bernstein?
Good morning.
Chair Kehoe?
Present.
Staff participating in the meeting includes CEO Santos Kryman, Deputy CEO Louis Lugo, Assistant Executive Officers JJ Popowich and Laura Guglielmo, Deputy Chief Investment Officer Jude Perez, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Senior Staff Counsel Frank Boyd, Mike Herrera, and Jasmine Bath, Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu. Staff and managers participating today include Carly Natoya, Kathy Delino, Sumi Wong, Ted Granger, Cassandra Smith, Louis Gittins, Vincent Lim, Ricky Contreras, Tamara Caldwell, Vicky Neely, Carrie Wilson, Hernan Barrientos, and Ricardo Salinas. LACERA's medical advisor, Dr. Glenn Erisman, is also joining today. Strategic Program Advisor, Kathy Magida, and consultants include Stephen Murphy and Debbie Donaldson from Siegel Consulting, Robert Schmidt, Janet Jennings, and Ryan Cook from Milliman, and Tax Counsel Jenny Kringle. Trustees, please use the raise your hand Zoom option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you are ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Great, thank you very much. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Harris, can you please lead?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item is item 3, which is our procedure for teleconference meetings. We have none, so we will move on to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes of July 6, 23.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Please vote. And motion passes with 1 abstention. The next item is the public comment period. I have 1 request to speak, and that is Mr. Tom Wiki.
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. Tom Wiki appearing on behalf of Vivian Blase, who's on your agenda, specifically articles or section 16A1. This is a case which involves the beneficiary and the selection of beneficiary options. Anthony Blase was a clinical social worker for the county for over 20 years. Unfortunately, in October of 2016, he was diagnosed with ALS, or the Lou Gehrig's disease. With that disease, you progressively get worse until you pass. He continued to work for another year till September of 2017, and then went on long-term disability with Sedgwick. He was on that particular plan for 2 years, which would have been September 17 to September of 19. The thinking at the time with he and his wife was he would retire in September 2019 on a regular service pension. As time passed, his condition digressed significantly to the point that Mrs. Blase obtained a power of attorney to make decisions on his behalf in 2017. By the time we get to 2019, he began deteriorating to the point where he needs to be provided life support, which he does. She, Mrs. Blase, is then advised that she has to file for her retirement now so that she can get payments in September of 2016, when he would pass away. So she immediately comes down and files the paperwork, selects the option where she would receive 100% of his findings, his pension, under the unmodified plus option. That would go into effect in September 2019, after the LTD ends. Unfortunately, he passes away on August 1st, 2019. She's under the impression she'll get 100% of his pay. It's not until February 2020 when she comes down here and says, when do I start getting my pension checks, that she learns she's going to get 65% of his pay. Why? Because he died in service. He hadn't retired yet. So the effective options for the beneficiary had yet to go into effect. She then goes through the process of the appeal of that and said, that's not what I was advised. That's not what I think I'm entitled to. She goes through the appeal process and eventually she retains me for purposes of presenting this issue to the board. We've provided a detailed letter to you about that. We believe that she is entitled to the 100% of her pay for several reasons. Number one, at the time she was counseled by LACERA, and we obtained a copy of the electronic file and all the documents, there's no reference to consulting her about what happens if your husband passes away before you reach September of 2019. Well, the answer is that was never discussed. Now, why would LACERA do that? Well, they're on notice because they have a power of attorney. Why would she have a power of attorney? It seems logical that would be part of the counseling session. That never occurred as well. At no time was Ms. Blase provided information. If he doesn't live until September 26, 2019, you will not get 100% of her pay. Therefore, there was a misunderstanding, a mistake, if you will, an error, if you will, of this lack of communication. I don't need to remind you, and you know this, as a fiduciary, you're obligated to explain to the member what exactly the rights of the member are, even if the member doesn't ask the question. LACERA has a superior knowledge to know what the options would be. The member does not. As a fiduciary, that's the critical part of your relationship with your members. That was breached in this particular case. Lastly, if that is true, what is the remedy? Well, under government code, specifically 31541, there's a provision under the law that you can correct a mistake or an error. And in our written paperwork, we explain how that easily can be done. There was an error. LACERA staff reviewed that and said, we don't think there was an error because we did our standard counseling session. This is not a standard counseling session. And she should have been advised as what would have happened if he passed away before his long-term disability benefits ended, which is unfortunately what happened. That lack of understanding is why we're here today. We think that in reviewing our correspondence that she should have a change in her retirement date so that she will receive 100% of his pay, as he indicated in writing before he died by selecting the unmodified plus. With that, we thank you very much.
With you. We'll be hearing that in closed session later today. I have no other requests from the public to speak. So we will move on to our executive update, which is item 6A, our LACERA All-Stars.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, trustees. It's the time of the month we recognize staff members who have gone above and beyond in helping deliver a great member experience or to help their fellow staff members. Please join me in congratulating Michael Huang, Judith Cajulis, Angel Calvo, Kelso Templo, and our web watcher, Benjamin Juarez. There was no ride share winner. So thank you very much for all that you do for us. We appreciate you.
You're here, stand up. Yeah.
And that takes us to the part of our agenda where we recognize a member who has provided excellent service to the county. And it's here that we're reminded why we do what we do. And so this month, we are recognizing Steve Powell, who is a rescue boat captain for the LA County Fire Department, who's retiring with 36 years of service. So, he has a tremendous job. He's out there commanding a boat, doing the search and rescue, and saving people's lives every day. And we appreciate everything that he's done for us. He's a little hesitant about retirement, but he feels the time is right. And he's really looking forward to traveling and seeing some of his kids he hasn't seen on the East Coast in a long time. So, Mr. Powell, we thank you for your service and thank you for reminding us why we do what we do.
Thank you. That brings us now to our service awards. And I believe we have a order. Ted.
Good morning, Chair Kehoe, Board of Retirement Trustees. I would like to recognize and thank Coriana Wong. Coriana retired at the end of July. She had 23 years of county service, all with LACERA. Coriana worked in our disbursements unit. She was primarily responsible for processing the disability services accounts payable items, meaning she paid all the bills for Ricky's group. She also prepared our legal expense reports. She did our quarterly use tax calculations and payments, and she also reported our 1099 items to the federal and state governments. She is known for her due diligence and hard work. She eagerly attacked her workload, and she basically didn't finish until she was done. In her retirement, Coriana will spend more time with her family and friends. She will also be traveling to Hong Kong where she will visit her relatives. So we're very excited for her. Coriana will be greatly missed, and we wish her all the best in retirement. Thank you.
Morning, trustees.
Good morning.
Today, we recognize Latanya J. Robinson for 25 years of service. However, she's actually served LACERA since 1994. She started as an agency temp and worked her way up to a supervisor over the highly specialized advanced payroll unit within benefits. And she served in this capacity for more than 10 years. Ms. Robinson now plays an integral role in determining whether disability retirement is right for our members on an individual basis, allowing LACERA to provide an enhanced level of service to members before their case is reviewed by your board. Thank you, Ms. Robinson, for your dedication.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Speech.
She did it.
Oh.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. The next one, I would like to ask Fern Billingsley to come on down, please, and have a seat. Have a seat up at the front as you are so used to. So I use the very limited power and authority of the chair to usurp your certificate and to be able to read it to everyone because that you have done so much for this board. I knew the board wanted to honor you and be the ones to present your certificate. So I have a book, just everybody be aware, get settled in, but this is very well deserving of all that you've done for LACERA. So Fern witnessed the growth of LACERA and its members and supported the legal needs of the fund in fulfilling its fiduciary duty, treating their issues as her own to ensure that the members receive the full extent of the benefits and to secure retirement to which they are entitled under the law, and treating the assets of the fund as Fern's money and evidence of her prudence and loyalty. And Fern shepherded LACERA through changes in the fund's complex governing law, including the California Constitution and Proposition 162, the County Employees Retirement Law of 1937, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013, tax law and judicial decisions, by repeatedly reading the book in her passion for the law and assisting in updating practices so that there was no compromise in the quality of service and the accuracy of benefits. And Fern is recognized and respected as the expert on benefits by generations of LACERA board trustees, executive officers, staff, and legal colleagues, as well as sister systems and lawyers throughout the state, for her advice, training, constant availability, and good judgment. And Fern was the foundation and spirit of LACERA's legal office as it grew from 2 lawyers, of which she was the second, to a budgeted staff of almost 30, providing firm, legally sound, and personally empathetic, caring support as a leader, mentor, and friend, enthusiastic, positive energy, enhancing the culture of the office, and leadership and wise judgment for her benefits section team and the rest of the office. For these reasons and more, the Board of Retirement and Board of Investments, on behalf of the LACERA staff and its members, recognize and express their appreciation and respect to Fern for her excellent service and wish her the best in retirement and a future life. And we do have, the board does have one last request for you. We'd like you to do one legal analysis and determine our authority to deny your retirement. You have till the end of the month. If you could please get us that report.
Keep waiting, it's coming.
We like to bring you up for a photo with the board. In the pit? Yeah, let's. I think it's better if we all get.
Yep. Horseshoe.
Yeah, or if everybody wants to.
Yeah. Inside. You're all coming in?
Yeah, let's bring everybody in.
Yeah, you gotta stay inside.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not going. Great.
And that concludes all of our service awards. And we'll now move it over to the CEO's report.
Great. Thank you, Chair Kehoe. Trustees, good morning, everyone. This is going to be a very, very quick report because we've got a lot of things to get through. So I just wanted to remind everybody that the election for the trustees begins Friday. I'm sorry, the voting begins on Friday and it runs through August 31st. So everybody, all the members should be getting ready for their voting credentials so that they can vote online or they can vote via phone, or all retirees will be receiving a mail-in ballot if they so choose to use that. So we're excited and been working very, very closely with the CEO's office, the executive office, making sure that all of our members are aware that the election is happening and the voting is beginning. In terms of our hiring needs, we're still working through all of our most important. Well, they're all important, quite frankly, but we're working the hiring plan that we've had outlined. We've run into some difficulty in terms of trying to retain attorneys for our benefits side or investment side, but we're continuing to work with our consultant to try to identify those individuals that we feel would fit in the LACERA's culture and would provide great service to our members moving forward. I do want to let you know that I do have a meeting scheduled with the CEO's office to talk about some of those difficulties in terms of salary structures, in terms of tier 2, tier 1 issues that we have to discuss. Also wanted to impress upon them the strategic plan, the 100-day report, the changes that we wanted to make in the legal division in terms of creating our compliance capabilities and so on and so forth. And so that should be a pretty productive meeting that's scheduled. Mr. Lewis and I, Mr. Lugo and I will be meeting with them on Friday. So I'll keep you posted on how that goes. The IT positions, we're also working through those as well. The information security officer position, we've completed the last round of interviews, and so we have an offer out now. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to close that deal very, very soon. I don't have anything else to discuss, but I'm be more than happy to stand for questions at this time.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions from any board members?
Yes,
That's great.
Mr. Carmen, I totally understand the difficulties that you are mentioning, because the most important thing is the uniqueness of this LACERA family. And you mentioned one word, the operative word, and that to me is fit. Do they fit into our culture? Because we don't want to find out later on down the line, 6 months, a year later, that we have problems that are brought to the board. I understand the difficulty in terms of also salary that is commensurate with what is in the industry. So I wish you luck on that. And I know you're representing us well. So thank you, both you and Mr. Lugo.
Great, thank you.
And Herman, no comments on the hiring plan? I was just gonna call it you automatically. I'll take that as a good sign. You're going in the right direction. Perfect. Thank you so much. We're now going to move on to our disability retirement applications on our consent calendar. So that is page 1 and 2, applications number 62E through 83E. I'll make a motion for them.
1 second.
Moved in second. Let's please vote.
Motion passes.
Motion
unanimously.
passes. Now we have page 3, which is our fire and lifeguards application 1642B through 1654B.
I'll move.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Perfect. Thank you. And now we have our general members. It's going to be page 4 and 5, application 2553C through 2566C.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you so much. That moves us now to item 8, our consent items. We have items A through F. I will take a motion.
Move approval.
Moved and seconded. Let's please vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
Perfect. That brings us to our excluded consent items. We had none pulled, so we'll move to our non-consent item. Item A, which is what we have all been waiting for, our actuarial report on OPEB.
Yes.
I think that does take some actuaries to do that, though, so we will invite them to the table.
Good morning
Good morning.
again. We're here today to discuss and present the 2022 other post-employment benefits program actuarial evaluation, or the OPEB program valuation report. With us today is Robert Schmidt from Milliman, and also joining us via Zoom is Janet Jennings from Milliman. So I'll have a few brief opening comments, and then I will hand it over to Robert and Janet. This report is really the funding report for the OPEB program. It's designed for the plan sponsor to make funding decisions. This report also serves as the basis for the GASB 75 report. That report is the accounting report. That report goes directly to the county and is used by the county to update their financial statement disclosures regarding the OPEB program. Your board approves this report in its capacity as the administrator of the county's OPEB program. For the 2022 reporting cycle, these are the two reports that we're preparing for this year, the valuation report and the GASB 75 report. This valuation report is based upon the 2020 experience study that was done for OPEB. The next experience study, and Robert will talk a little bit more about this, will be for 2023. So that's the upcoming cycle. And our plan is to hold an education session for this board probably in January to sort of kick off that process. And as far as the review, Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting is our reviewing actuary. They did not participate in this particular cycle. We have them participate in the triennial cycles when the experience studies perform. So that'll be for the next round or the next cycle. We will engage Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting. One other item, the LACERA OPEB funding effort. There are a couple slides that Robert will touch upon, and this is in reference to the additional funding that LACERA provides for its portion of the OPEB trust. If you'll recall, this board and the Board of Investments approved an updated LACERA budget policy back at the end of 2022. That budget policy allows for LACERA, the CEO, to take a look at a potential surplus near the end of the fiscal year and to essentially double LACERA's OPEB trust contribution. He can allocate an amount up to the original budgeted amount. So the good news is we were able to do that back in 22. Some of the results will be discussed today. And then we did it again for 2023, just this most recent fiscal year that ended. And we'll discuss that, of course, in a little bit more detail for the next cycle. So I did want to update the board on that effort. And so in closing, unless there's any questions for me on sort of the overview, I'm going to hand it over to Robert and Janet.
I think we can proceed with the presentation.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ted. We move to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about the overall agenda for this section of the meeting. I'd like to start with some highlight results. We'll talk a little bit about the process that was followed this time, which includes assumptions, and then get into the valuation results. Also talk a little about historical information, touch on the additional contributions, and then time for questions and comments. We've also placed a glossary in the back to help define some of the fun terms that we like to throw around. So feel free to stop me if I ever say anything that isn't familiar, but I will try to explain as I go along. Okay, next slide. I would like to thank, before I get too far into this, thank LACERA staff for their gracious help in this process, and also Siegel and the other stakeholders that we will talk about in a little bit. Highlights of the report this year are that we are continuing with an agent structure. So that means the structure of the report is such that the agents that are pre-funding have their own sections to show the progress of their pre-funding, and then the other agents that are not pre-funding are grouped together into their own section with their OPEB program valuation calculations. Employers that require financial statement reporting get that through a separate GASB 75 report. But we're here today to talk about the funding valuation report, which is used by the employers to help make funding decisions in reviewing the contributions and their funded status progress. So what we saw this year in the report was a small increase in liabilities and costs. And it's really a product of a couple of things that are offsetting. We always have an increase due to the passage of time. So interest accrual on a liability causes an increase.
The retirement experience study assumptions are adopted for our valuation as well. Those did affect the liabilities, increase them a bit. A new healthcare trend assumption increased liabilities a bit. And the asset performance for the 12 months ending June 30, 2022 was also below assumption. So those all worked in the direction to increase unfunded liabilities. On the other hand, we did have favorable claim cost experience, and our discount rate remained the same. So the net of all that is a bit of an unexpected increase in liability, and I'll break that down in a little bit. What we did find, though, is that employer contributions continue to progress toward reaching the actuarially determined contributions. We call them the ADC. And we estimate that that milestone of reaching that ADC will be reached in about 5 years for the county, about 4 years for LACERA. And this is based on, we base that on the track record of contributions. The Superior Court has been a little less regular in its additional contributions, so is not yet projected to reach that ADC milestone. And we also saw a slight decrease in active membership combined with a increase, which continues to happen in the inactive membership. So those are the highlights, and for the rest of the time, I'm going to kind of delve into those a little bit more, help explain them. So let's go on to the next slide. Actually, 2 slides, please. This is the timeline of our work this year. And it is a year-long process. It's pretty involved. We do involve a lot of different constituent stakeholders along the way. And it's a large undertaking. So we spend time with the data, we analyze the census, make sure that the LACERA staff has a chance to review our initial census summaries. We work on the funding valuation. We take into account the 7/1/23 renewal premiums that come out in the first quarter of the year. And then the process of exposing the report to the different stakeholders, making sure we get everybody's input, and then meeting finally to present to the Board of Retirement. So next slide. Our process summary is where we are in the green bar. We are at the July 1, 2022 funding valuation. Our last experience study was back in 2020, and those are done every 3 years. So we've got another experience study coming up next year. And we actually have a busy year coming up because we have an experience study, evaluation, and an actuarial review by CABMAC all happening on the 7/1/2023 results. So that's the plan for next year. If we move on, we'll summarize just a little bit all of the entities that are involved. We have the 3 main funding agents who are pre-funding: the county, the Superior Court, and LACERA. We have representatives from the union that are involved, the unions, SEIU, Local 1014, and the Coalition of County Unions. We also work hand in hand with Siegel, the consultant to LACERA, and then various actuaries. Chiron, the actuary that consults with the county, Rail and Letson consults with the union, and then of course us. And you'll notice that CABMAC, as Ted said earlier, was not involved this year. This is not an actuarial review year for them, but next year you will see CABMAC on that list as well. Next slide, please. So to summarize then, as I've said a little bit earlier, we're using our 2020 experience study for the OPEB related demographic assumptions. And then the 2022 retirement benefit related demographic and economic assumptions from that experience study. In terms of the assumptions we update, every year we do update the claim costs based on the new renewals that are coming through. So we update the claim costs. And then the current environment is used as well to update trend. And this is where we've seen a recent uptick. Although CPI is coming down, there's a 1 to 2 year lag with medical costs. So the initial increases in CPI are just now finding their way into medical costs. And so we do project a temporary increase for a few years in trends before trends moderate again in the future. So in summary, this valuation is based on the June 30, 2022 census and the July 1 of 22 and 23 health plan premiums. All right. So let's move on and we'll talk a little bit about the economic assumptions. As a review, we did set the investment return assumption in the 2020 experience study, but we do verify it at each valuation to make sure we feel it's still reasonable based on current allocation. So that 6% and the 2.3%, we think those are still reasonable. Those will be examined and potentially reset for the 2023 experience study when we do that. So in summary, then we updated the claim costs, the trend rates, and those are the assumptions that were updated for this valuation. If we move to the next slide, this is just kind of a illustration of the rates and those discount rates and who they apply to, which agents. The 6% applies to the 3 pre-funding agents, and then the 2.3 applies to the outside district agents listed there. The key is that we can use the 6% because the funding policies of those pre-funding agents are projected to accumulate sufficient assets to pay the benefits for the foreseeable future. So that's why we use a 6%. But the outside districts are not accumulating assets in the OPEB trust that LACERA, the OPEB trust that it's established through LACERA. So that's why we use a general asset rate of return for those agents. Okay, so now I'd like to delve into some of the numbers so you'll be able to see kind of how the liabilities and assets changed from the prior valuation to this valuation. July 1, 2021, we had an actual accrued liability, and that's really described as the accrued present value of all future payments to members that were there on July 1 of 2021, retirees, actives, and the terminated vested members. That was just over $21 billion. We had $2.31 billion in assets accumulated towards that. And our actuarially determined contribution back then was 16.76% of payroll. Coming 1 year forward, we expected the actuarial accrued liability to go up to $22.3 billion. We also expected the assets to go up to $2.83, so that we would have had about a $19.5 billion unfunded actuarial accrued liability. What actually happened was that the liabilities went up more than expected and the assets went up less than expected. And you can see that moving from item B to item C, and all the reasons for that are detailed in between those two items. So the retirement experience study, as I said earlier, changes in demographics, life expectancies, retirement patterns and such did increase the liability. Claim costs experience, on the other hand, was favorable. So that was a gain on liability. However, we did update the trend assumptions to reflect our anticipation of increased medical inflation and trend in the future. And the other items were a small gain, other experience. Combined with that, we had about a $440 million asset loss due to low returns. They do fluctuate, but this next year, I think you'll see a different result for the year just closed. Did I hear a question by any chance?
I actually do have a question, Mr. Chair, and through the chair, may I ask Mr. Perez to provide this board a brief overview of the investment with regards to this particular fund? I mean, we did not meet the 6% hurdle rate. And if you can provide this board with a brief overview of that, and what's the status of the alternative implemented the alternative investments to help us get to the 6%.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Kehoe and trustees. Definitely, Trustee Santos. Last year, the fund, as we know, the markets were down last fiscal year. So as they're going through the actuary, you see the loss. This year will be a different story, should be made public this afternoon, but the OPEB fund is going to have a 9.3% return for the fiscal year. So that we'll see a good benefit for that. As for the privates implementation, it's going on. Hamilton Lane is continuing to implement. We have not had our first capital call, but we have signed sub-documents into different funds. So we should see a capital call within the third quarter this year. So the plan is going as stated, and it will also be included in the asset allocation study as we go through this year as well. I do think one thing we'll have to look at, in case he did mention, we go through an experience study next year of what the actual return will be for the three funds, if it changes from 6%, goes up or goes down. But as we continue our exercise and discussions with the BOI, we'll be going off that 6% number.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Okay, please proceed.
Okay. I also wanted to talk briefly before we go to the next slide about the normal cost rate and the ADC percentage. So as the liability went up a little more than expected, we also saw the normal cost, which is the cost of benefits earned in the year, expressed as a percent of payroll. We saw that normal cost rate increase from 6.78% of payroll up to 7.26%. That also caused the actuarially determined contribution to increase from 16.76 to 18.27% of payroll. I'm ready to move on unless there are any other questions on this slide. Okay. All right. So the next slide shows how that liability, that $23.1 billion liability, is broken down by different type of benefit. So you can see that the major benefit that makes up that 23 billion liability is retiree healthcare benefits. So that medical benefit, it includes the prescription drug benefit, is 76% of the total. The next major benefit that's provided by this fund is Medicare Part B premium payments for those that are Medicare eligible and have elected Medicare Part B. That is 18% of the total. And then the next benefit there is the retiree dental and vision benefit, which is about 5% of the total, followed by the retiree death benefit, which is about 1% of the total. That's the makeup of the liability. Another way to look at this would be to break it down on the next slide by type of member. So half the liability is active members, and the rest of it is almost entirely the retired members, with a little sliver for those that are in between their working years and retirement years. We call them deferred vested. All right, the next slide summarizes our pay-as-you-go benefits as they project out and compares them to the projected trust contributions. So the pay-as-you-go benefits are the yellowish colored smaller bars. But what you see is that the trust contributions are in addition to those benefit payments, so that the true total contribution is the sum of the two. And you can see how that's projected to increase out for the next 10 years. Next item we wanted to go over is historical information and projections. So this is a chart that we intend to keep updating from year to year. It enables you to look back in time to the first valuation of this program back in 2006. That was our initial OPEB valuation. Back then, the accounting rules and the funding rules were different. We ended up with a 5% discount rate that we used for 3 valuations. Then the discount rate started to float more based on some new information. And we had experience studies along the way, of course. The pre-funding started back in 2018. That was the initial agent valuation. We also had a change between 2014 and 2016, where we had a tier 2. And 2016 was the first valuation where the tier 2 information and liabilities were first reflected. And we've been stable at 6% now for going back to 2018. We will take a fresh look at that, as was mentioned a little bit ago. But that's a summary kind of the investment return assumptions for the different agents. If we go on, we also like to track the population. So what we see here in our left-hand set of bars is the actives. And that has kind of gone up and down, depending somewhat on economic forces and decisions made by the county. So what we did see a steady stream of increases in the last couple of years. It's come down, that active member count. However, the vested term members and the retired members have consistently increased. And that is really a product of continued retirements outpacing lifespans, so that people continuing to live longer. So those groups continue to grow. If we go to the next slide, that's our projection of liabilities and assets. Actually, we start with the history, and then we'll get to the projections. So the history, what you can see is for several years, our liabilities, which are represented by the blue curve, did increase. They actually started to decrease at the point when we started to pre-fund. And you can see in 2014, the first year we actually have assets, that's when the liabilities peaked. And as the funds pre-funding has happened, we've been able to increase the discount rate to anticipate returns from the fund, the pre-funding. That's really helped to decrease that liability while the assets continue to increase. So an improving picture when you look at the difference between the two curves there. If we go on to the next slide, this is really the same period of time. The difference here is that we're now showing you the total contributions in comparison to that actuarially determined contribution. The point of this chart is to show the progress of those lines coming together. Like I said a little bit earlier, we expect those lines will come together for LACERA and the county in the next 4 to 5 years. So this is great progress to continue funding the program to help provide assets to back those future benefits. If we go to the next slide, it's really the same two lines, but now they are expressed as a percent of payroll. And the nice thing to see here is that at least until the most recent valuation, the cost of these benefits as a percent of payroll expressed through our ADC calculation was decreasing. We did have a temporary increase here. I think with the good asset performance this year, we should see hopefully continued stabilization and maybe progress there on those contribution rates. All right, now if we look out into the future, we are at approximately 20 billion of liabilities, and that is projected over the next 30 years to go up more than 3 times, up to about 70. So for those of us that are lucky enough to be around, we'll see over 3 times the liabilities that we have today, assuming no other changes in the program, of course. This is a static population, no changes to benefits. And we should see assets exceeding 40 billion by that point in time. We also, if we look at the next slide, we expect to see an improvement in the funded ratio. And I should say that these last 2 slides are focused on the county. It's the largest agent. And because these projections are really done separately by agent, we chose to focus on the county to keep it simple. It's the vast majority of the liabilities and assets. So funded ratio over that same period projected to be about 59%. One thing important to note here is that if you kind of look at the shape of that curve, you can see it's increasing, but the rate of increase is slowing down a little bit. And that's because our ADC is based on normal cost plus a 30-year amortization of the unfunded. And it's a rolling 30. So what that means is if you roll the clock forward and you continue to do a rolling 30, you're probably never going to get to 100%. At some point, if the goal is to get to 100%, the agents will have to adopt a shorter amortization period. The 30 is kind of a holdover from the initial GASB 4345 statements that required no less than or no more than 30 years to amortize. And we've kind of kept that. But I think, in our next experience study, we will consider the possibility, in conjunction with staff, of suggesting some other possibilities for that amortization period if the goal is to ultimately reach closer to 100%.
So that would be, excuse me, that will be lowered down to amortization for 20 years, as we have in the pension. What's the thinking there?
Mr. Chairman and Trustee Santos, we need to have some conversations, but 20 years is closer to a sustainable period that will, reach 100. But I don't know that that'll be the only conclusion or the only option that we come up with.
Right. So Trustee Santos, what we usually do is when we go through the experience study process is we get together our stakeholder group. That would include the County of Los Angeles, their management teams, their consultants as well. We'll take a look at the options that Milliman calculates. I'm assuming that Chiron, who's also on the stakeholder group, will take a look at that. And then we'll get input from them and we'll bring back some options that the county's reviewed. So I can't guarantee that will be the option, the 20-year. We'll discuss it with the county and see what their thinking is.
I see. And the difference is because this is a county program as compared to the pension. And therefore, LA County carries a lot of weight, so to speak, in making determinations in terms of the unfunded liability.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. I understand that. Interesting.
The final approving authority, though, is this board.
Yes, your board approves the assumptions, the assumption study and the valuation. That's correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, cooperation, coordination, all the things that gets us to that point. But I just want to clarify that.
Correct. And historically, that's how we've done it over time. And all these changes that Robert talked about in terms of implementing the GASB 74, the 75, the agent plan, we've invoked that stakeholder group, that model to go through these things with the county. And ultimately, that's why it takes us about a year to work through these reports and these cycles. So yes, that's our model.
Because every element has give and take throughout the entire thing. So we understand that.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yes. Mr. Green.
Just a quick question for understanding here that, you're using the 30-year projections, right? And I understand that you're saying that's an industry standard and we're talking about reevaluating it to something different. So how much clarity or how, what's the loss on, these numbers? So 30 years out, I mean, these are just assuming that everything stays the same, everything's constant, right? There's nothing different from the 22 valuation moving forward. So how much is lost? Is that compiled into it, or is that going to require an adjustment on that 30-year mark? Is it?
Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to clarify the question, are you talking about economic loss as far as
just some of the the funding liability and whatnot? We're looking out 30 years, and with the assumption that everything's going to be consistent. And I'm asking how accurate that is. Is that the genesis with requiring to look at a different time frame to get better resolution, to give it better understanding on what it actually might look like in?
But is this, it was the 30-year was picked because this is a newer program, but now as it matures, that's where we're trying to bring things into alignment. I think that kind of ties into, we did the 30 years because it was a new program which allowed more flexibility in the rest of the numbers. But as we start to get off the ground, we can start pulling up the flaps, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That, is that the genesis behind the 20 years? Because it's obviously not that accurate. You're making assumptions that everything's going to be constant for 30 years. So when we look at that 2052 number, 53 number, it's just kind of a.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Trustee Green, you're right. It is a kind of a middle of the road projection. We sometimes do studies like this where we look at kind of the cone of uncertainty over time, where it could be better and it could be worse, and that cone tends to get wider as time goes forward because there's more variables that could go different directions. But this is kind of like our if you're looking at our best middle of the road estimate, that's what this is, as opposed to the potential extremes but we could look at extremes too if you were interested in, well, how much higher could it be? How much lower could it be? That is something we can look at.
Thank you. That's it. I'm just, I'm wondering, and that's the whole purpose of looking at a different time frame to get better accuracy, better, narrow that time wedge down, that cone of uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Can I make an initial comment? Yes. Yeah, so that's just following up on Mr. Green's question. And so that's why it's very important for us to do this exercise every year, and the extensive triennial evaluation that we do every 3 years. So it allows to measure our numbers, our assumptions, the best we can to figure out whether we are going in the right direction or not. Would that be true?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Trustee Santos, definitely. Think of it as driving a car. You're headed for a destination, and you've got to steer frequently in order to stay on the path you want to be on. And that's what these valuations are. I view them as moving the steering wheel a little bit just to stay on the path. Exactly.
Perfect. Additional, you can move on with your presentation.
Okay. All right, let's go on then to the next slide. And this is just an illustration of something I mentioned earlier, which is the county and LACERA and the Superior Court are contributing less than the ADC today. This just shows how that total contribution from the county in this case is projected to continue to increase based on their expected plan that they've shared with us, and how that will ultimately increase in the next 5 years and reach that actuarially determined contribution going forward, and how much that is per year. And again, this is assuming everything goes according to plan as well. If we look, yes.
Comment on this page, and I would just note that this is something we discuss every year when we go to New York and present to the rating agencies. This is a significant accomplishment that the county has stayed on track with. They've been saying 27, 28 for, 6 years now, every time we go back there. So the fact that the county is on track is significant in this regard, and we should be very proud of that.
Right. And just to add on a little bit to that, I know we get projections from the county every year on their contributions to the OPEB trust. And it seems like we always get a little bit more money than they actually projected. And so that's good. And as well, again, I always point this out, but the county's making 2 sets of contributions to the OPEB program, both the PAYGO, paying the current bills, as well as contributing to the OPEB trust. And finally, some folks like to use the ADC when the county sort of meets the ADC. Some folks like to call that sort of fully funding the program. I don't know that the actuaries necessarily completely agree with that, but a lot of plan sponsors like to use that measurement stick. So, yeah, great.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair and Trustee Knox, I would also add that I work on hundreds of these, or I see hundreds of these valuations, and LACERA in the county and are exemplary in the fact that they are funding, because 90+% of the ones are not funding. They have 0 assets. So this is great to see this happening.
And just to follow up, and as such, the unfunded liability quote unquote, it's only $20 billion. If we didn't have pre-funded, it would be over $30 billion, maybe close to 40 by now. But so this is, I agree with Mr. Knox, this is significant. Because quite frankly, as a member, I have been terrified over the years before the county began to pre-fund. Especially when you look at the city, the city, the OPEB trust is, I believe, is a 50% pre-funded. So that has been kept me up at night many nights. So this is wonderful, and can say good things about it, good things about it.
Yeah, we definitely can't understate how important it is that the county took this step. I'm happy to see it continue to mature.
All right. Next slide, please. This just outlines some of the assumptions that are used for the projections. As I said earlier, static active enrollment. So what that means is we project into the future that people will retire, but as they retire or terminate, they are replaced. And so in our projections, we bring in the new hires every year when we do those 30-year projections. We assume payroll will grow at 3.25% overall, total payroll. And then the 6% return is included in those projections. And also the projections, since we had to run them before our valuation, our 22 valuation was done, they're actually based on the prior year's valuation with an adjustment for the assets as of June 30 of 22. All right. The next topic is the recent additional contributions made by LACERA to their portion of the trust. So I wanted to just go over that a little bit. This is a great development that we've seen where we've been able to work hand in hand with LACERA staff to create a model to help them, basically a computer model that we allowed, we turned over to them to allow them to try different contribution levels to see what those additional contributions would do to the funded status of their part of the retiree health obligation. So it was graphical. We update it for them, and basically it'll enable them to look at putting in additional contributions on a year-by-year basis and see what that does to the net funded status, the funded ratio, the ADC, and then their total contribution. As a result of that, LACERA did revise and adopt a budget policy back in 2022, allowing the CEO to discretionarily utilize budget savings to make additional contributions to the OPEB trust. And then those contributions may be up to but not exceed that year's budgeted OPEB contribution. If we look at the next slide, we'll be able to see the history there of what happened. So for the year ending June 30 of 22, the total was just over 3.1 million. In 23, that total, they were able to double essentially the budgeted to get up to over $3.7 million in contributions.
Are these are specific for LACERA employees?
Specific for LACERA, yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then on the, and this is more of a staff question, but I know that savings on the budgetary side could be used to offset. Does the CEO have the authority? I'm sure the answer is yes, but the CEO has the authority simply to ask for proper, funding of this at the front end rather than having to worry about budgetary savings being moved over. And I asked that question because I'm concerned about us trying to save money just to offset rather than just saying, why don't we just budget for it from the very get-go and properly fund it.
Right. So
probably executive thing, but Ted, you could.
Right. I mean, I can give it a try, Chair Kehoe.
Yeah.
So the LACERA budget essentially is based upon the county's budgeted projection for the contribution to the OPEB trust. We participate in the OPEB trust on a proportional basis with Los Angeles County. So I would say that the CEO is developing those numbers based on that county projection. That's the initial LACERA budget for the OPEB trust. As far as the budget surplus, it is up to the CEO, but basically we take a look about the beginning to the middle of June and we say, okay, what is the surplus? I'm not aware of any of the management team going out of their way to save money for the OPEB trust contribution. That's not usually the case. We're not trying to not hire people or not spend money for that. We basically take a look at the raw numbers and we say, okay, we do have enough to match that original contribution. So. I don't know.
Yeah. Chair Kehoe, and your point's taken in terms of making sure we're budgeting to our resources and not to an end goal in terms of reinforcing the pre-fund of the OPEB fund. The ADC, as Robert mentioned in Milliman, that really sets out the obligation from not only us, but also the county and the superior courts. In terms of just a separate line item, I think that's something that we can certainly explore. But certainly we wanted to make sure that we had an avenue if we did have savings that we can funnel that. But on a separate note, maybe that's something we can explore further as it relates to having a separate line item to do kind of a more accelerated funding mechanism.
Because from a budgeting standpoint, I'd rather just plan on fully funding it and then do the savings on that. And if you have to offset increased costs for the year rather than the reverse. Because then we get, I think, closer to an actual budget. So those are just my general thoughts. But I'm happy that we're doing it. So I just want to make it very clear. I'm very happy that we're going above and beyond and ultimately reducing our portion of the liability sooner. So it's very good, and I appreciate that. But I'm just thinking maybe just a different philosophy on the budgeting side. And I pass that on to staff to consider as they put together next year's budget.
And I support the chair on that. I think having a line item for this is very important in my view. So something, and definitely this board at the end, when we approve the budget, we have the ability to make any changes there, but it will be better if it's coming from staff that includes a separate line item for pre-funding the retiree healthcare for our employees.
But I'd just like to say through the chair that when we first started thinking about adding additional funds into the pay for LACERA's OPEB obligation, we thought that this was a good formula because we weren't sure exactly how the budgeting process with the county was working. At least I didn't understand it. So I thought that a percentage of savings would be a good way to do it. I also thought that capping it to, doubling the amount of money that we're projecting at that time was a good idea. I think now that we're 2 years in, we need to take a look at our budget. And what I'd like to do in the instructions that I've given my staff is that we're going to take a look and try to figure out what percentage of the OPEB trust does LACERA want to fund over a 5-year period of time. Do we want to be at 35%, 40%? And what does that mean? And then at that point, we can dive into what the impact on our budget is going to be. So this was just a way to present the idea to you all. And I give the board trustees credit for their foresight in saying, yes, this is a good thing for us to do for our employees to pre-fund it at greater amounts than what is required from the county in terms of what our proportional share is. And so the next budget cycle, we will definitely take a look at that. We'll come up with some percentages that we want to meet in the next 3, 5, 10 years. Do we want to be 100% funded in 10 years? Do we want to be 100% funded in 20 years or what have you? And then we'll work backwards. And then we'll definitely rely on Ted and our actuaries to assist us with that budget number on an ongoing basis.
Perfect, thank you. And I think it does set the bar high too for the rest of our partners when they look at OPEB, and we're putting more than is necessary. Thank you. Okay, we'll have you proceed with the presentation. I know we've been pulled off tracks a few times, so we're I think we're getting 40 minutes into our 25-minute presentation, so I'll have you try and power through if you can.
All right, Mr. Chair, I think we're almost there. So let's go to the next slide. This just shows over the last year where you would have been without the additional contribution versus where you are with the additional contribution in the year ending with the valuation date. And you can see the biggest percentage difference. If you divide the percentages, it's really 14 over 12. It's a 2% absolute increase, but a 17% relative increase in the funded ratio. So that's really where the biggest benefit is seen, is in that funded ratio. That's really the last major slide. The only thing I want to add is that we expect that we may be updating the additional contribution model now that we have new valuation results. So we'll be in touch with staff to think about how to do that. That's for your needs. Other than that, any other questions? Happy to answer them. But that's the end of my prepared remarks.
I'll open it up to the board. Any questions? I think most have been asked throughout the presentation. This is an action item, and we do need a motion to approve the OPEB valuation report. So I will take one.
Move approval.
Been moved and seconded. Just please vote.
Mr. Sanchez, how would you like to record your vote? Oh, very good. Mr. Harris? The motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. I will now use the LACERA air horn to wake up the rest of the audience. I joke, this is very, very important, and I appreciate the presentation and the discussion and the engagement from everybody here on the board as well. That brings us to our reports. All of our reports are information only, items A through G. I'll ask if any board member would like to pull for discussion any of the reports. Seeing none, we will now move to items for staff review.
I just have one item related to the actuarial valuation for the OPEB program that staff consider a line item for pre-funding LACERA's OPEB.
Perfect. Now items for future agendas. Any board members have any requests or additions? Seeing none, we will go to good of the order, and Bonnie, I'll have you give everybody.
Mr. Green?
It's a beautiful day. Another heat wave coming. Glad to be here. Good to see everybody. That's it.
Mr. Knox?
Good morning, everyone. Nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Harris?
I'll just speak on behalf of Trustee Robbins, who is not here. I've never seen Trustee Robbins cry, but I'm sure today he would be crying to see or learn that Fern is going to be leaving us. And I just want to echo all the comments that were already made previously and how much you have meant to this organization. I know I've heard it said that, when you take your hand out of a bucket of water, the water just fills in that void. This is a case, I think, where the hand comes out of the bucket of water, but the void remains, because you were that important to this organization. And I want you just to know how much we totally appreciate everything you've done for us. Hope you become a monumental actuarial loss and have a full time.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein.
That was well stated. I've got nothing to add.
Mr. Santos?
Confirm. Congratulations. Well deserved. And yes, it's sad to see you go, but very happy, because retirement is beautiful. I'm not there yet, but don't slow down. I might run you over. Thank you.
Ms. Gray?
Thank you so much. This was a good meeting, short, but a very informative meeting. And I know that Mr. Kehoe said, well, it's going to be a long presentation on the OPEB trust. However, I have to say that the way staff presented it, and also the memos that came before, was not only educational, but it helped me understand more what you all were talking about, because for years it has been a difficult subject to really understand, but it was very helpful this time. I don't know if it's because of the years I've heard it over and over, and now I get it, but I got it. So I thank you for all the work that you did on this. The other thing is, Fern, I'm gonna miss you. I'm really gonna miss you. In fact, there are issues that have come up, and I would tell my colleagues, we'll call Fern. And now, can we have your cell phone number, please? Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you.
Trustee Sanchez?
Oh, just thank you to staff. Thank you for whoever.
CEO Santos-Criman?
Yes, I just wanted to thank the trustees for all of their support. It means a great deal to myself and to staff, and it makes things run very, very smooth. Appreciate all of the hard questions that you ask, both in public and in private conversations that I have with you all. I do want to thank my staff as well for all of their hard work. I know that they are an incredibly talented group of individuals, and so I would be remiss if I didn't recognize them. I do want to say something about Fern. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with her. She's always been very supportive and very forthcoming with explanations, and really bringing a new CEO along. I think she's done a pretty good job, quite frankly. But I do want to leave you with this thought that I think that if LACERA has a dominant gene in its DNA, it's Fern, because she's the one that really set the foundation, or assisted with setting that foundation, working through a lot of very complicated issues. PEPRA was a monumental task, and the way she went through there, the memos that I've read over time were very well written, self-explanatory. You just say, okay, I get it. And so for all of that work, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the executive team, on behalf of the management team. And I don't think that there's an individual that's shed more tears than Mr. Rice, notwithstanding Mr. Robbins' feeling for Fern. So Fern, on my behalf, I just want to say thank you for a job well done, and retirement well deserved. And so we will do everything possible to make sure that on the 30th of every month, you receive your well-deserved pension. So thank you.
Chief Counsel Stephen Rice?
Thanks to the board and to Santos for dignifying and raising up Fern's recognition to the board level. That's what it deserves. She's that important to the organization so I really appreciate that. But on behalf of the legal office and myself, a few words need to be said as well. Not just on the substantive side, is it going to be hard to fill in the space in the bucket, but on the cultural side too. And Trustee Gray, you mentioned the fit issue earlier, and that's part of what Fern brings to the legal office and to LACERA, is not just her unparalleled expertise in Searle and PEPRA, but also the things that she brings as part of the spark plug of the legal division, and even beyond the legal division, the glue that she is for the division, and all that's going to be greatly missed. Her sense of humor, her passion for what she does, which is just infectious. So that part of it, that cultural side, is important. And we will be thinking about that as we think, I'm not going to use the word replacing because that's not possible, but for the next senior benefits staff counsel. Beyond her book smarts, I go to her as much for her practical judgment. She just has a lot of common sense. So she brings that practical judgment, that common sense to any legal issue, but also to any organizational or governance issue as well. So she's just a vital resource to me, and also I think to the executive office as well. That practical common sense, that street smarts. Finally, as far as a final gift that Fern is leaving us with, and I think it's partially intentional, but also partially just the way she has done business in her work in the legal office for the past 30 years. But she has built an incredibly strong and cohesive team in the benefits section of the legal office. So the well-oiled machine that Fern led with Elaine Salon, Karina Lopez, Hannah Wynn, and Elizabeth Tirado is going to remain in place and humming along while we complete the search for the new senior benefit staff counsel. And that's a tribute to Fern's leadership. She has made them that way. She has made them tight because she's trained them and because she's cared about them. And as a result, they care about LACERA just like she does. So thanks, Fern, for everything you've done for me, you've done for LACERA, you've done for our members. You've enhanced our ability to perform our fiduciary duty, and congratulations on your retirement. I am seeking a second opinion on the ability of the board to ride the application. Anyway, thanks, Bert.
Thank you, Chair Kehoe.
Thank you. Well, I concur with everything that was said across the entire room just now. And my last thing that I'll say with Fern is that normally what I hear from people that retire, they say, I miss the people. That's what I miss most. And in this case, it's going to be the total reverse, where it's all of us that's going to be missing you as you retire. So I really hope and pray that you get very bored in retirement and you find a way to come back and interact with not just us, but the entire pension system in California. So hopefully you're not retiring to Texas or anything like that and disappearing from us. And we'll see you around. And I have a feeling that we will. So that being said, we will go ahead and proceed with our agenda. We're going to go into closed session, but I am going to give us a 15-minute break, and then we will get started right then. So what is that? That's 10:50 a.m.
Thank you for thinking about the old
Recording stopped.
I'll wait till the Got a countdown.
We are good to go.
Okay, thank you. For the record, item 16A2 relates to the employment claim of Cornelio Gavriliuk. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go back